In life, we all encounter obstacles, and those obstacles come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. The question is, how do we handle those obstacles? Do we attack them head on, or do we allow them to make us quit? Welcome to the No Quit Living Podcast, where we aim to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up on themselves, their dreams, or their goals. We will interview successful people from all walks of life as they share their no-quit stories when they had the choice to give up or give in, but they didn't. We thank you for listening, and we hope to be that jolt of positivity as you go for your greatness. Welcome to episode number 216 of the No Quit Living Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is change. Our quote of the day comes to us from Billy Cox. Life will only change when you become more committed to your dreams than you are to your comfort zone. Today's episode is sponsored by the good people over at West Fair Communications, who publish the Westchester County Business Journal and the Fairfield County Business Journal. These newspapers do a wonderful job in covering all aspects of the business world within two of the most influential markets in the New York metropolitan area. You can also take advantage of their daily news feeds, which keep track on the companies and thought leaders in these important regions. For more information, take a look at www.westfaironline.com. Trust me, once you start reading, you won't quit. I've been following today's guest on social media for quite some time, and I'm really excited to have him on our show. He speaks about many topics that are near and dear to our no-quit tribe: getting out of your comfort zone, vulnerability, and making change. Drew Manning gained 75 pounds in 6 months and then lost it all back only 6 months later. In his fitness journey, Fit to Fat to Fit, he pays it forward to others, and he does it through leading by example. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Drew, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living Podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Chris. Really appreciate it, man.
So the first question I ask everybody is, are you ready to bring it today?
Let's do this.
So as we said before we went live, the number one objective of our podcast is to motivate and inspire people to never give up. And I was curious if you had either a no-quit story of your own or perhaps a really challenging time that tested you and you didn't give up and you kept on going.
It's a good question. So my Fit to Fat to Fit story is pretty interesting, and I'll kind of summarize it to make it really quick for this podcast. But so I did Fit to Fat to Fit, which was this crazy journey of gaining weight and losing weight. But a lot of people don't know I had a full-time job in the medical field at the time I was doing this. I was a part-time personal trainer, had my full-time job. I was safe, everything was good. Then I did Fit to Fat to Fit, and then pretty quickly, I wouldn't say overnight, but pretty quickly, it became really popular, went viral, went on a bunch of TV shows, and got a book deal out of it. Had to decide between following this passion of health and fitness and doing Fit to Fat to Fit, or staying in the safe zone and keeping my job in the medical field, which was really cushy. I decided to quit my job and pursue Fit to Fat to Fit full time. And then from there, just to fast forward a little bit, I launched the book, went on a bunch of more TV shows, started 2 seasons of my hit TV show. But a lot of people don't know during this time that I was going through some personal issues, actually went through a divorce. So that technically, I guess, wouldn't fall into a no-quit category. But for us, it was better for both of us in that situation. But what I want to talk about is, from a business perspective, a lot of people don't know that I struggled for the first 5 years to make money with Fit to Fat to Fit. People assumed, oh, you have a TV show, you have a New York Times bestselling book, you must be, a millionaire. And in reality, no, I was struggling financially for years. There would be times of a feast, times of famine, if you will, during those 5 years of ups and downs and personal turmoils that I was going through. And there was times where I'm like, am I going to have to quit this and find a corporate job to have, a salary coming in? I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but there was definitely moments where I wanted to maybe throw in the towel and say, that life would be easier if I just got a 9-to-5 job and went back to what I was doing before. But after 5 years of ups and downs, I was like, this is something that I'm passionate about, that gives me that drive, that brings fulfillment into my life when I do this. And even though I'm struggling financially, I want to keep going. So it was about 2 years ago that I finally hit a breakthrough, and my business exploded, took me to a whole nother level that I never would have imagined. And had I quit and thrown in the towel and said, hey, I tried and it got hard, and I quit when it got hard, I wouldn't be here talking to you today.
I really appreciate you touching on that. And I think to your perspective, people see a book or people see a show, and not just you, but in general, they assume that people are crushing it. And the reality is, you talked about, it took you 5 years. And I love the quote when people say, I became an overnight success. It just took me, 10 years of overnight. And I think people see the end result, and a lot of times they don't realize what goes into it. And why don't you just ask you a follow-up question to that is during those tough times and the struggles of the ups and downs, as you mentioned, what was it that you were putting in front of your eyes or putting in your ears that kept you going?
That's a good question. I would listen to a lot of podcasts. I think the first podcast I started listening to were Tim Ferriss's, which were a good variety of, he talked about nutrition and exercise, but then also mindset, business, success, failures, all those things. And that just kind of helped me have this vision of what I want to do with my life. Do I want to do something I'm passionate about? And I kind of was doing that. I was just surviving. I wasn't really thriving. And it was, consuming podcasts and audiobooks and speaking with, some mentors and some, very successful people, and surrounding myself with those inner circles of really successful people that I opened up my eyes to, starting to believe that I could do these things that I used to think were impossible. And it wasn't until I stepped out of my comfort zone that I started to believe in those things. Because before, I think a lot of us are born with this mindset that we only deserve so much, X amount. And that's what our parents taught us. Like, hey, this is who we are. This is the type of people we are. We aren't these types of people. And that's why rich people, kids of rich parents become rich, and kids of poor parents, for the most part, become poor. I'm not saying 100% of the time, but in general, because a lot of the mindset is passed down generation to generation based on their parents' experiences and their grandparents' experiences. And I think for me, I had to break through that cycle, and you have to get out of your comfort zone to break through that cycle.
No, I think that's key, and I think that's so true. And statistically, it's probably very accurate. Is what you hear and see from parents and people. Usually you follow in those footsteps. And I think it's not until you really get out of that comfort zone. And I'm glad you touched on. Wanted to just ask you quick, if you wouldn't mind, just telling our listeners a little bit about exactly what you're doing now and who you are.
Yeah. So like I said, most people know me from my Fit to Fat to Fit story. I gained 75 pounds in 6 months. One of the hardest things I've ever done. I chronicled the whole thing on my YouTube channel, my website, showing what I went through physically, mentally, emotionally during this journey. And that's kind of, where everything originated. It's like I said, the book deal, my first book came out, Fit to Fat to Fit. That turned into a TV show on A&E, where now we took other trainers through this process of gaining weight and losing weight so that they could have more empathy and respect. And then from there, I would say over the past 2 years, we've created a ton of digital content in the keto space. So I kind of jumped on keto about 4 years ago, went on the Dr. Oz show talking about the benefits of it, done a ton of research, surrounded myself with doctors and the leading scientific researchers in the keto space to understand the science behind it. And then from there, built a powerful platform of digital content, so mostly ebooks and cookbooks. And then I have an awesome marketing team that has helped me take my content and put it out there in front of the masses. I couldn't have done it without them, but we've been able to, increase our brand to an 8-figure business, which I feel very fortunate, very blessed, because I couldn't have done that by myself for sure. But that's kind of who I am in a nutshell. Obviously, I have my own podcast. I do a ton of speaking engagements on stage, and I love interacting with people. I have my second book called Complete Keto, which takes the lessons that I learned on the mental and emotional side of transformation from my Fit to Fat to Fit journey, and then I plug that into a ketogenic program, right? A ketogenic program for transformation. So it has all the tools on the physical side of transformation, right? How to do keto, understanding how keto works in the body, a program to follow, the recipes, workouts. But then more importantly, when it comes to overall or complete transformation, it's the mental, emotional, spiritual side that needs to happen too. And that's kind of what I talk about today. And that's what I bring into my brand, which no one really talks about in the fitness industry. We're also focused on macros and calories and workouts and supplements, and all that's important too. I'm not saying that's not important, but it's not the most important thing. That's not what people struggle with. It's the mental and emotional challenges that hold people back. And so my book, Complete Keto, is a way to overcome mental and emotional challenges while giving you the physical tools you need for a physical transformation, but it ends up becoming a lifestyle change because of the tools on the mental and emotional side as well.
So 6 months to gain 75 pounds. How long did it take you to lose it?
6 months. 6 months of gaining, 6 months of losing. Luckily, it worked out that way. And I was able to call it fit to fat to fit instead of fit to fat and stuck or whatever else, but luckily I got back to fit, but with a new perspective. Sure.
No, that's awesome. And I think what our listeners hopefully realized and get out of this, whether they're familiar with you or if they're seeing you or hearing you the first time, is the reason you did that is because you wanted to understand everything that went into it. And I think that's, for me, the people that I follow on social media and in life in general are the ones that have done certain things. And it doesn't mean you have to be the absolute best at it, but the reality is there are a lot of people out there that are doing things and haven't really put in the time and the effort. So I think it's amazing that you did that, and I commend you because obviously you understood the process going into it and the process going out of it.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
So might be a tough question, but if you had to describe it in the shortest time, what is the basic common theme behind keto for any of our listeners that are not familiar with it?
Sure, I can make it super simple and super short. So most of us run off of something called glucose, which is sugar that is comes from carbohydrates. So anytime you eat carbohydrates, it gets turned to glucose in the body. Glucose is a very fast burning energy that we use as an energy source for our brain, muscles, and organs, right? When you're on a ketogenic diet or you're in a state of ketosis, your body is using a different fuel known as fat. So we break down fatty acids in the body, we convert them into ketones, and that's all our alternative fuel source for glucose when we don't have any glucose. And so we have this ability to run off of both sources of fuel. It's just you're running off of fats when you're in a state of ketosis versus running off of sugar. So it's this really cool ability that our bodies have so that if we stopped eating today, every human would be in a state of ketosis within a couple days because we're able to survive long periods of time without food, even though we feel like we're going to die if we go a day without food, right? But it's really cool, natural backup metabolic system to run off of fat as energy versus sugar.
It's interesting. That's exactly how, word for word, I would have described it myself.
Awesome. There we go.
So if I had to ask you if you had to define yourself in one word, what would that word be?
That's a good question. I would say empathetic. And that really does stem from my Fit to Fit journey. The biggest thing I learned was empathy. And I think empathy is one of the most powerful things that can change this world. I think this world needs more empathy, especially in the fitness industry. Empathy is a really powerful tool because no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So you could have all the knowledge as a trainer, a coach, a leader. But if people that you're trying to preach to don't know that you care about them first and foremost, they could care less about how much knowledge you have. I think that's how people are motivated. That if someone truly takes the time to get to know them, understand them, their struggles, they're going to be more willing to listen to their advice on how to fix them.
No, I think that's so true. And like I said before, the fact that you went through it, the weight gain and the weight loss, not only do you understand it from a physical perspective, but like you said, the mental, emotional, and you're empathetic towards it. And I think that's why you've had that breakthrough, like you mentioned a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
So one of the things we identify and we've been really interested is the importance of a morning routine. And I was curious if you have a morning routine that you swear by.
Here's the thing. And, I'm a parent, I'm a dad. I could have the best morning routine in the world, but if one of my kids wakes up and has a nightmare or wakes up early or wakes up late, like it throws my morning routine off. So I do have a morning routine that I try and stick to 100% of the time, but it's more like 60-40, I would say, just because in a perfect world, it doesn't always happen that way as a parent. All the parents out there listening can relate to this is, I try and wake up, drink a ton of water, some salt as well. And then from there, I'll meditate, do positive affirmations, a gratitude list. And then from there, I'll plan out my day. And that right there, it probably takes 10 to 20 minutes to do all of that. But that right there, if I could be consistent with that, it makes a huge difference in my day as far as my outlook for the day, my attitude for the day, my energy levels, just my stress levels as well. if I could stick to that kind of morning routine, that one works perfectly for me.
No, and I knew you had a morning routine because I've been following you a little bit on social media and some of your videos and things. But the reason we asked that question and why I love asking that question is there is no right answer. There's no right or wrong answer. And somebody that has 3 kids and is married, his or her morning routine is going to be different than somebody who's 19 and single and going through college or something like that. So I think it's really important. But the things that you touched on, waking up, having water, doing the things, meditating, positive affirmation, those type of things. Those are things that have been constantly repeated by a lot of our guests. And I think it's just so amazing because successful people follow other successful people and success leaves clues. And I think it's just important and that's why we love asking that. So wanted to ask you an interesting question. If you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself one piece of advice, now assuming the 20-year-old version would have listened, what would that advice have been?
Don't care so much about what other people think. I used to be so paralyzed by what other people thought of me that I would literally change who I was to conform to someone else's ideals or perceptions so that they would like me, right? Because I was so insecure. I wanted other people to like me, thinking, oh, if they like me, then I'm worthy. And if they don't, then I'm not worthy. And so I would kind of conform to other people's perceptions and cared so much about what they thought. And I tried so hard at that as a kid, and I wish I wouldn't have done that because I feel like I lost my identity, or I never really found out who I was doing that my whole life. It was a way that I adapted to my environment, but it took me a good 30 plus years to figure out who I was when I stopped caring about what other people thought about me, and when I owned my story and I embraced vulnerability as a strength and said, hey, this is who I am, and this is my story, this is my past, and this is where I am today. There's power in that. There's power in owning your story and embracing vulnerability as a strength. And it's so liberating to live an authentic life for the first time and not have to be so concerned about, oh man, okay, if I act this way, if I say this, what's this person going to think of me? Maybe I shouldn't do that because I'm worried they might not like me. So I don't go through that anymore. And it's freeing. And I just wish my younger self would have learned that at a younger age.
No, I think that is good advice that we all could have probably taken that, not only 20, but probably 14, 15, and 16. But I want to touch on one thing you just mentioned is embracing vulnerability as a strength. Wanted to just ask if you wouldn't mind touching on that just for a second, because I think it's so important, and I think it's something that I think people actually think about the opposite, is they think vulnerability is weakness. But I agree with you, but I want to just get your perspective real quick on that.
Yeah, so really quickly in a nutshell, my perception was that it was a weakness, and that just was based off of how I perceived things as a kid, from the sports I played as a kid, the culture of the family I grew up in, the culture of the religion I grew up in. I felt like, hey, if I talk about my feelings, there's going to be some type of punishment or judgment, and so I should probably just keep those feelings and thoughts to myself. And so I did that for a long period of time, and it eventually broke me as a man because I would hide things about myself. I was ashamed and felt guilty about decisions that I had made in the past, and I wasn't ready to open up about it. So I just figured, you know what? Selfishly, I was thinking, I am protecting these other people by not telling them the truth, because the truth would hurt them so much that I'm going to be the one that suffers by keeping it inside. When in reality, you do that, you realize that it doesn't just affect you, it doesn't just hurt you, it definitely hurts other people. And once I hit rock bottom, and I started reading books by Brene Brown, went to a life coach that helped me see things from a different perspective and see vulnerability as a strength. It took me years. It didn't happen overnight, but it took me years to finally get to a place where I had the courage to own my story and embrace vulnerability as a strength, so much that I even got it tattooed on my forearm as a reminder, because I had been so ingrained with the thought or the perception that it was the opposite of that. And now that I've embraced it as a strength, I promise you, especially all the guys listening out there, it is so liberating. It's scary for sure, but it's so liberating once you make that leap.
No, I couldn't agree more, and I'm a huge fan of Brene Brown. Have you seen her special on Netflix?
Not yet. I will eventually once I make time to Netflix and chill one day.
Definitely check it out. So, interesting question for you. If I could give you the opportunity to have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would you pick and why?
Just one person?
You could pick 2 or 3 if you want.
That's hard. I would actually say my top 3 list would be Brene Brown, The Rock, and Will Smith. For some reason, those 3, their energy there's something about them that just pulls me in, that I just want to pick their brain and find out, why they are the way they are, and just, understand their mission, their purpose in this life. So I would love to sit down with those three at some point, but we'll see. My network is growing, and you never know.
I will tell you, we don't know each other that well, but you literally hit the nail on the head. Is those are three people that I look up to, and
Wow.
I was just going to ask you a follow-up question. Is I know in today's day and age, it's so easy to follow different people, but I was curious from a social media perspective, are there anybody that you follow from that same perspective? And I'm sure it's probably those three people.
I definitely follow those three, but also another one that stands out is Glennon Doyle Melton. She's friends with Brene Brown, and her book Love Warrior was something that was very personal to me when I was going through my divorce, and actually had the chance to meet her finally in person and thank her, which was really cool. So I love what she's about as well. Let's see, but yeah, definitely those three are in the top for my social media following.
That's awesome. So we have a clothing line, and we do a lot of stuff with the word #accountability. And I just wanted to ask you to get your perspective of what the word accountability means to you.
Man, accountability is huge when you're trying to change your life in any form, physically, financially, emotionally. You have to have some type of support system. And for me, having some type of support system keeps you accountable to those goals, because if you just keep your goals internal, I get the whole idea of, don't tell anyone until it happens. Most people don't have that willpower to just grind through it to make that transformation. Some people can do that, but I think accountability is one of the biggest things that people need when it comes to when it comes to any kind of transformation in their life. And so, staying accountable to an audience, whether it's on social media, staying accountable to friends, family, an AA group, it doesn't matter who it is. Find some type of support system to stay accountable to, so that you push yourself outside your comfort zone when you need to, and that's what helps force growth in our life.
No, I love that, and I couldn't agree more with that. Have you yourself ever entertained an accountability partner?
Not one-on-one, but definitely, like I said, through these other methods of like a social media group, for example, like a mastermind, for example, something like that, or a personal friend or family or mentor, a business partner. We keep each other accountable separately, but not like I've never hired someone as a one-on-one accountability coach.
No, I think it's awesome that you answered that question that way, because that's what I define accountability partners is. They can be paid, they can be non-paid, they could be somebody that you're friends with, somebody that is just a business perspective. But the reality is, like you said, is when you commit and also have that person commit to you, it takes the accountability to a whole new level.
Yeah, I agree with that, man.
So I wanted to jump into what we call our hot seat questions, and these are kind of fun. And the only question we ask you is if you're okay to just spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. This I'm actually interested in. The first one is, if you had one last meal and you could pick absolutely anything for it, what would you pick?
Pizza and coconut cream pie.
Favorite sport?
Football.
Favorite team?
Yeah, San Francisco 49ers.
Do you have an all-time favorite quote?
Yes, I do. I have many of them. Though the first one that comes to mind is from Tony Robbins: nothing in this life has any power or meaning except for the power and meaning that we give it.
It's a great quote. Favorite smell?
Coconut.
All-time favorite movie?
Shoot. That's a hard one. Saving Private Ryan.
That's a great film. Favorite book?
Daring Greatly by Brene Brown.
Favorite singer, group, or band?
Red Hot Chili Peppers.
And if you were stuck in a foxhole and you could only pick one person to have your back, who would it be?
That's a tough one. Jocko Willink.
That's a great one. That's a great one.
There we go.
So wanted to ask you, what's the best way for our listeners to connect or follow you? And also, what's the best way for them to find out more about you, as well as to purchase your books?
Yeah, so my book, Complete Keto, is available Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Just type in Complete Keto. You'll be able to find it. And then all my social media handles are Fit to Fat to Fit with a number 2. So that's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, just Fit to Fat to Fit. That's my website. It's my podcast. It's my first book as well. So it's pretty consistent across the board.
Awesome. And then the last question before we let you go, I wanted to ask you if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners.
Yeah. In my opinion, life comes down to perception, and we're all a product of our environment. And if you could learn how to change your perception of your situation, you realize that you can change the story that's created in your head, and then you can create your truth, your reality. But until we learn how to change our perception of the situation, of our circumstances, then we'll be stuck in that same story we've been telling ourselves that we've been programmed to think. And so, in my opinion, if you can learn how to change that perception, you can change your story, you can change your life. And I know it's a little bit easier said than done, but it's possible.
No, I couldn't agree more. Well, listen, Drew, I truly, truly appreciate it. I definitely would recommend our listeners to check you out and follow you, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for listening to episode number 216. On today's show, Drew touches upon some of our favorite topics. He mentions the importance of getting out of your comfort zone and just how key it is. He shared how everything for him seemed to change when he looked at vulnerability as a strength as opposed to a weakness. 3 people that Drew follows on social media also happen to be 3 people that I look up to myself: The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, Will Smith, and Brene Brown. If you haven't checked out some of their stuff, I would highly recommend it. In his parting words, Drew inspired us with his perspective on how we can all change our perception, change our story, and ultimately change our life. It clearly is much easier said than done, but it is possible. So in conclusion today, I hope you realize that we all have the opportunity to change. It won't be easy, and it definitely won't happen overnight, but it is possible. Drew himself gained 75 pounds in 6 months and then lost that 75 pounds only 6 months later. So I challenge you today, whatever it is you want to accomplish, try, or change, go out and do it. And as you go for your greatness today, make sure that you get out of your comfort zone and you take action. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.